Greetings, dear viewers. Anthony Marsh Jr. on Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film with a brand new Terra Adventure podcast episode, bringing you episode 232, presented by my Morphin Megaverse Power Rangers Facebook group. Haven't joined? Check it out now. Just a couple of minutes ago, actually at the time I'm recording this, I had recently, not so long ago, had already rewatched a video from the following Power Ranger YouTube channel that I have been following since 2018 or so. So, not so long ago, among most of the Power Ranger YouTube channels, YouTubers that do Power Ranger, content, most of them, one of them is probably one of the most interesting I've been watching videos of about the franchise for some time. I would like to do a video response to the Disney brain on a particular Power Rangers Lost Galaxy centric video about, what he did recently about Trakeena. And I realized there were some things I wanted to open up, even though I don't want to take everything he said word for word. But there is some things I do need to bring up about what made her, by the term in definition, overlooked. Because for the longest time I've been in the fandom since the beginning of the 2010s and ever since my little thing and whatnot, I really need to bring up some things, what he did said a little bit, but really have to tie it with use my own words in response because out of all of the villains over the near 30 years of Power Rangers and of all the villains of the post-Zordon era, I guess I have to admit it, because over the years I've been in the fandom, and due to my current nostalgic obsession with Lost Galaxy over the last 11 years recently, since the big resurgence of the fandom ever since 2010, following everything that's happened, but the rest of the same song and dance. But when I was watching the video, there were some things that made me want to think about Trakeena a lot more, because I've already figured the character was a tragic figure of a villain, just like, Ransik and Master Org, and several other Power Ranger villains that were just as tragic as Trakeena and Ransik and Master Org, like Mesogog, for example, and Jared and Camille in Jungle Fury. But the thing was, like, every time when I do bring up Power Ranger villains, especially the people who only talk about Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed most of the time, I get it, but it's just I guess I have no choice but to throw in a little bit of what my personal fixation with the character during my recent years in the fandom. But the problem was, over the years I've been obsessed with Power Rangers as an adult, with all this huge resurgence of the franchise via the big wave of 90s nostalgia, that when I was watching or trying to rewatch those old episodes and get a sense of who those characters were, because over the decade before the last one that we just had, long ago, back when seasons like Time Force and Wild Force and Dino Thunder and them happened, and when Disney had Power Rangers, I was severely deprived of a Lost Galaxy rerun fix, because most TV networks were not rerunning Lost Galaxy much, especially during the Disney era. By the time we had Netflix, the DVDs, and even when Lost Galaxy had some life of reruns again, this on the CW's Vortex block back 9 years ago in 2012 until 8 years ago in 2013 in January, I was very deprived, and I was also very deprived of memory of Trakeena's character. I know who her character was in concept, but by the time all this nostalgia for the series started hitting me, then I started to realize who her character really was over time, the older I got. Because when I was younger, I knew who she was. She was Scorpius's daughter, and, when her father died, and then she wants to retaliate against Terra Venture and the Power Rangers for her father's destruction. And when cast aside, when after everything that had happened with her father, and then also she wanted to be bigger and stronger, but her father was so much like, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. Because I've done, like, you know, being a Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan myself, and, you know, as much as I've been obsessing about Trakeena to death, because basically I realized this is where my toxic fan entitlement was coming to play over the last decade, and why I have to reduce that toxic fan entitlement about the character. Not the actress, but the character. But the thing was, I realized that she is a tragic figure, and over the course of the 11 years I've been in the fandom now, since 2010, and here I am 2021, I realized there were some things that had gotten to my attention with her character, aside from, you know, her simplistic story arc. Because when I was in the fandom, and whenever I do my fan labor stuff with PRLG while we had the Neo Saban era and so forth, I was always trying to figure out ways about Trakeena, and, you know, of course, you know, with the fan fiction stuff, because I don't want to, you know, I know it's leaning towards that direction. But when we're talking about the main stuff that happened to her in real time in the story of you know, of Lost Galaxy, and with everything with her mirrored reflections of her character arc being a mirror to our fellow Red Ranger of the season, and then taking elements of how Scorpius screwed over Magna Defender, and then seeing how, due to how Scorpius ruined Magna Defender's life, killing his son Zika, and then when Scorpius died, then that would reflect for Trakeena to have revenge against the Red Ranger, much like how it's already a reflection of when Scorpius killed Magna Defender's son and ruined his life pretty much entirely. Because Lost Galaxy, you know, be honest though, over the years I've been obsessing about these Power Rangers. I mean, I know it's a great series, and it's still one of the best seasons of Power Rangers, but lately, now it's been over 20 years since that season had happened. While I still enjoy Lost Galaxy, but the problem is, for me personally, and why I said back in my last episode about how I ruined Power Rangers personally for myself, is because of how overly obsessed I was, and out of nostalgia. But even if it's a good thing or a bad thing to be nostalgic about it, because knowing the fact that, yeah, it's a reminder that, yeah, Power Rangers was good with this kind of stuff, and you know, again, based on my past behavior as a fan, talking about how, you know, Megaforce and Ninja Steel will never have the same complexity of villains like, you know, post Zordon and Disney had with their villains, and even in space. But when it came to, you know, the fact is with Trakeena is that, from my perspective with the character, she was what she was. And, you know, I've said this before a couple of times, that she's not supposed to be like her spiritual predecessor, that being Astronema, because Astronema, her character arc was very unique for Zordon era standards, going into the post Zordon, because knowing the fact that Astronema is tied to a Ranger blood wise, and knowing the fact that Astronema was once Corone, and Corone was Astronema once she got kidnapped and was raised to be evil, but she was really born good alongside her brother Andros the Red Ranger, and they were both on KO-35, you know, what they were. They had, you know, her childhood was robbed because Darkonda found her in the woods unexpectedly. I don't even know, because the actual series never fully explained what happened to Astronema. You know, I mean, Corone, when she got abducted, it's just somehow just time jumped to a current, you know, to present moment with where Power Rangers' history was at that point in time with her character. And we all know what happens with Astronema, how she had second doubts and second thoughts and thinking twice over, is she really evil or is she really good? But she was good, but she was brainwashed to be evil because, you know, evil is better and good sucks. Ha ha ha. You know, it's good to be bad. You know, welcome to the dark side. Have some, you know, cookies. But the thing was, Trakeena is not supposed to be an Astronema, you know, repeat, because while some people who had dismissed Lost Galaxy in certain points in their lives as fans, I can understand and I can buy into that, because I get that there were, you know, when I was in the fandom, whenever I do bring up Power Ranger seasons or bring up a Power Ranger season, out of seasons that are the most popular versus seasons that are, you know, great but never is talked up much about. I mean, Lost Galaxy should get more. It has been gaining a lot of cult following lately now, thanks to Netflix and then all the fan following on everywhere since then. And actually, it's been had a fan following before all of this. What we're doing now as a fandom on the social media and the internet and such now on YouTube, and also binge watching the series for a gazillion, you know, infinite time on Netflix. But since Netflix is leaving, Power Rangers, you know, is including Lost Galaxy. But I just have to realize that there were some things that I've already been figured she was, like I said, she was tragic. But people just didn't think of how she was going through. It's just they worshipped her like a loyal queen, like no one's business. That was her character from what I perceived of the character. And, you know, despite where her story arc began, because over the years, I mean, I've done plenty of Trakeena mentions and rants over the years in the past, but for a recent one, it's just, again, I'm trying to refrain not to repeat everything he says, because, you know, Disney Brain is very, you know, very strongly expertise with his videos on Power Rangers, particularly Lost Galaxy, because you can tell he's very passionate about Lost Galaxy, much like anyone. And knowing the fact I'm the, you know, since I have a channel that's okay, I got, again, remember, I got a timeout on trying not to be too egotistical with me and stuff here, but I have to think about other fans out there too, to the fact that they enjoy the same thing as I do. But that I never really thought about it that way, that she, you know, there was just so much about her that whenever I did talk about, you know, her to other people in the fandom, I've always had some negative responses to people who thought of Trakeena as, you know, whatever. Because even when I was doing my personal, you know what thing, fan labor wise, for the last decade, which I felt like was a waste of time on my part, whenever I did brought up that character, no one really knew about Trakeena, because I get it that there were people who grew up on Power Rangers during the Zordon era up until like mid-Turbo because of the cast change and stuff like that. But I understand people's lives are different and mine is the same. But I have to realize that, well, she is, you know, she is one of those villains that nobody barely talks about, other than she was one of the best things to come out of Lost Galaxy, and she was one of the most developed and darker villains of the series, and that's all people can say about her. Yeah, but then also people would always jab about how Scorpius looks less like a scorpion whatever, and not, you know, but rather a half scorpion, half spider, half octopus looking puppet thing, because that's probably why I never did care for Scorpius. But personally, I never really cared much for Scorpius, even if Scorpius is Trakeena's dad, but being an animatronic puppet and all. But if Scorpius was a lot like, you know, Trakeena in a human state, while still having the insectoid vibe entitled to his character, you know, being a villain, I would buy into him a lot more. But since Scorpius was what he was, there was a reason why I felt that, you know, based on my personal headcanon, you know, or multiple infinite headcanons for PRLG and based on certain interpretations, I just wish that Scorpius, you know, if I were to do Lost Galaxy a different way, I would have just had Trakeena be the main villain from the start, instead of having her build up the way she was. And, you know, I mean, but again, I'm not saying I don't like her character arc, how she's been established in the Prime Universe, and knowing how they established her in the Prime Universe is still great and still fine. But I'm just saying, for if there was different interpretations to her character, where she didn't start off being overlooked, and have her go through such tragedy, because Lost Galaxy was a tragedy as it was behind the scenes, you know, as a show, and what goes on behind the scenes with the show is enough as it is, because Lost Galaxy's characters had gone through so much stuff, because again, that season was meant to be a different kind of Power Ranger series at the time, because that was back when Saban had the budget to actually have Power Rangers, thanks to Power Rangers in Space, and thanks to its success, and for the rise of mature storytelling going forward into the series up until RPM, and then we started regressing with the nostalgia pandering, MMPR 90s and stuff with Neo, Saban onward. But just thinking about this kind of storytelling, you know, with Power Ranger villains like this, we never got this kind of storytelling with Rita or Divatox, but we similarly had some shades of that, you know, what Trakeena would be like with Astronema, but the difference is Trakeena is not blood related to a Ranger like Astronema was. Trakeena has blood related to Scorpius, but again, Scorpius only lasted for 20 episodes, whereas Astronema lasted the whole season of In Space, but then when she got reformed as Corone, and then Andros finally got his sister back after she was initially had doubts to join the side of good, but then she got strayed, and then she got severely brainwashed to be completely pure evil with the cybernetics for the latter half of In Space, and then Countdown to Destruction happened. Okay, am I going a little too fast for anybody listening? Okay. And okay, I'll try to be slow. When Astronema got cybernetic implants, and then when she unleashed the Psycho Rangers to try to figure away the double cross Dark Spectre, and you know, so forth. And then when she tried to test her loyalty with Dark Spectre or with herself, and then Countdown to Destruction happened, and once Andros struck Zordon's tube, and then Astronema was no more, Corone was back, and then you fast forward more than 30 episodes into Lost Galaxies territory later, with Corone fully redeeming herself. But well, that's why a lot of things which, you know, Corone is one of the reasons why Astronema is the only character, you know, or the only villain to be, you know, a villain one sees, a character in Power Rangers to be a villain one season and a Ranger the next. We were not going to see this kind of a repeat with Trakeena, because due to the stuff that she had gone through. And, you know, and when it came to my time in the fandom for the last 11 years, and while I'm not really much notable, you know, or recognized much, but whenever I'm in the fan base, whenever I see other fans compare Trakeena to characters who had similar tragic backstories that would lead them to be evil and then later die, or other means, I've noticed I've been seeing a bunch of Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker comparisons with Trakeena, and even a much more popular recent comparison, Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. But knowing the fact that, well, I have to break it to you people, I'm going to try not to be completely negative about it, but as good as Avatar: The Last Airbender is, I never really personally saw that, because again, I never saw Avatar in its full extent with Azula, and seeing Azula being like the Trakeena of that show, with Trakeena being from Power Rangers and Azula from Avatar. But while there was shades of Darth Vader and Azula in Trakeena by many, for some out there, but for me, Trakeena was more like, to me, like the Maleficent of Power Ranger female villains. Because, well, you know, of course, I have to bring up Trakeena's Revenge, because for a simple reason, because where her storyline began to where her storyline ended within over a year in between the two seasons that she appeared, the whole season of Lost Galaxy and the crossover episodes with Lightspeed Rescue, that her story arc was, you know, she started off, you know, well, unlike Maleficent, who's just a mistress of all evil, and she's just straight up pure evil, and then turns into a fiery flaming dragon, and then Maleficent is gone, and that's the end of the Sleeping Beauty story. But Power Rangers Lost Galaxy was a different animal with Trakeena, and how she was raised to be, you know, this stuck-up, spoiled daddy's girl who wanted to do something, but her father wouldn't allow her, because he felt that she would get hurt by anyone out there that would try to harm her in any way. So Trakeena took matters in her own means to basically want to find someone to train her to be an unformidable warrior and a fighter and a queen of evil. And you know, again, that's simplistic storyline. That was her plot of the character, and that's what her character was. But if again, based on my personal headcanon, if Lost Galaxy started off without Scorpius as the main big bad to advance to building up to Trakeena taking over her father's place if he ever died, because Lost Galaxy has a strong overtone of all of this death and people dying, because again, it's, you know, again, Power Rangers maybe for kids, but it was starting to get very mature at a point, and that's why a lot of us fans love the series to death the way it is, because it's a cult favorite season, it's a fan favorite season. But when it goes that far into that territory, it really reached that pinnacle point with characters that lost loved ones, and Scorpius being a loved one. But no, in fact, again, like how I was personally as a Lost Galaxy fan, I never liked Scorpius, and I still don't. But I just wish that if Scorpius was like Rancic or Mesogog or Master Org, I would have related to the character, and then Trakeena and Scorpius could have been a great father and daughter villainous duo. And, you know, instead of, you know, having, you know, one family member, you know, just being in the, you know, background, and then one trying to make it into a rising rank in order to try to prove herself to her fellow family member that she can do this. But I wish that they could, I understand, but I'm not saying, like, you know, if I had her be a main villain from the start where she actually did stuff, that would sound like complete Mary Sue territory, if I do say so anyway. But yeah, of course she's flawed. I mean, she has to have flaws. I'm not saying she should be a Mary Sue villain. She's not a Mary Sue, because all characters that are established in canon and continuities and stuff have to have flaws. I mean, you can't have characters be perfect from the start, because that is, of course, bad storytelling 101, and it's borderline fan fiction, I'm thinking. But I mean, just because I personally don't like a certain villain's father, because most of the majority of Power Rangers, you know, most of the majority of characters in this franchise had mostly father characters as opposed to mothers, because again, we never knew who Trakeena's mother was, because when it comes to her beauty and stuff, you know, did she really wanted to be like her mother, with her being the most beautiful person in the galaxy, while also having some of that vanity of evil from her father? Because it's never been fully explained in the show. She just does what she does because, again, it happened over 20 years ago, 22 years ago. And knowing that we never did see those shades of that. When it came to once the tragedy started unfolding with her losing her dad, and when they appointed her as main villain of Lost Galaxy, because, well, thing was, Scorpius was boring, and knowing that Scorpius didn't do anything other than send monsters to try to terrorize Terra Venture and the Power Rangers, and try to get the following items that was possessed and connected to the Rangers' power source: the Quasar Sabers, Trans Daggers, Lights of Orion. But then after that, and then when Deviant came into the picture with the Centaurus and Stratoforce and Zenith Galactabeast, but then when those fell into the hands of the Rangers and not Deviant, well, basically, I understand that, you know, them advancing Scorpius' death to make, you know, Scorpius' death to advance Trakeena's character was a brilliant, smart move at the time. But what if things turned out very different to advance some tragedy? You can still have Trakeena still have revenge against the Power Rangers for killing her dad, but knowing the fact when you had a certain devious robotic mercenary and bounty hunter who was working for Trakeena and Scorpius' crew until backstabbing, lying, and fibbing, he was working, you know, and then did his own agenda, trying to, you know, do, again, the power struggle stuff. Basically, Deviant, while he was serving Trakeena when she lost her dad, he wanted the cocoon all to himself, so that way Trakeena wouldn't have that power. But knowing as an insectoid, when you're an insectoid, you know, if you have a human form, you have any sense of humanity, knowing the fact, what will happen if anyone who's in half human, half insectoid still lives as a human? They would probably die prematurely. So when I thought about a rewatch I did of Lost Galaxy 2 years ago during the 20th anniversary, when I was no longer doing this podcast anymore, I did thought about this. I did have this theory as a response to Disney Brain's recent video about her from not so long ago. That my theory was, thinking back to the cocoon and her, you know, her potential use of it, that if obviously if Trakeena used the cocoon to shed the beauty, she would live long as an insectoid, or die, because of course, well, it would explain when, following the final battle in the final episode at Lost Galaxy, when Terra Venture was on its last leg, when it was heading close to Miranoi and crashed, and when Trakeena turned green and Leo had to do what he had to do to stop her, because knowing the fact that Leo had to do what he had to do, because Leo knew what it was like losing Mike earlier, and then but with Trakeena still begrudgingly holding the grudge against the Red Ranger for destroying her, killing her dad, because you know how Power Rangers, you know, they don't want to say the Power Rangers killed my dad, I'm going to kill them. Because also there were some parallels I had with Trakeena with another character who had a villain for a father, and then that child would be a villain themselves, not just Azula or Darth Vader. But recall in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, I have to bring a reference to that, because when I was thinking back to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy with Harry Osborn by James Franco, you know, in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, when Harry found out Spider-Man brought his father's dead body to the Oscorp mansion, the Osborn Manor, he saw Spider-Man bring his father in, but he believed that Spider-Man killed his dad. And then, you know, for those who've seen those Spider-Man movies, not TASM or MCU or Spider-Verse Spider-Man, I'm talking about Raimi's Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire. And thinking back to James Franco's Harry Osborn in the Raimi Spider-Man films, with his story arc of wanting revenge against Spider-Man for the whole Spider-Man killed my dad, he will pay. And then come the next movie, Spider-Man 2, you know, he still wants to figure out who Spider-Man was and why his father died at the hands of the red and blue tided wall-crawling friendly neighborhood. And when Otto Octavius, when he was already Dr. Octopus, and come that half when Harry still was holding the grudge and gone through a drunken rage and vendetta of wanting Spider-Man dead, and then he joins forces with Octavius to have Spider-Man brought alive, not dead, of course, because once Spider-Man was chained up in the Oscorp Manor, so that way Harry can finally, you know, would exact his next step of his revenge plot, his revenge arc, that he wants Spider-Man to pay. But then when he unmasked Spider-Man and found out that Spider-Man was his ex-friend Peter Parker, and then comes Spider-Man 3, after having a hallucination with his father in the mirror in the last movie, then Spider-Man 3, he finally wreaks his revenge against his ex-friend, who is also Spider-Man at the same time. But of course, you know how Spider-Man 3 was with Harry, you know, him being bad at first, and then he had an amnesia, then he's back being bad, then he wants to be good again, and then he's dead. So there were some parallels between Raimi's Harry Osborn, who's a male character, and Trakeena, who's, well, female and in Power Rangers. But the difference was Raimi's Harry Osborn turned good after being back and forth evil and good, while Trakeena never had no good. She was straight up evil, because like father, like daughter, or like father, like child, like parent, like child, right? But if there was something I would rewrite from Spider-Man 3, Harry should have just, when he got his memory of wanting to kill Spider-Man back, he should have just died in the vein of like what happened to you know, his father, you know, the father figure that Peter had. But back to the Power Ranger side of things. I know I had to bring a reference to Spider-Man with that, you know, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies with that, other than Darth Vader or Azula. But with Harry Osborn, that's like Trakeena with the whole, you know, when a superhero killed a certain character, would-be villain's father or mother, that's how it is. But, you know, again, Power Rangers is a lot like Marvel with the, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Heck, I mean, if Trakeena was done in Power Rangers today, like in a cinematic universe, if we had that Power Ranger cinematic universe, I would like to see a Trakeena that was like the MCU's version of Nebula. because Nebula has Thanos for a father. But despite the stuff Nebula had went through in the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because, well, Nebula, when she was introduced in Guardians of the Galaxy 1, she was a villain and a sidekick, and she did do some bad stuff. But over time, over the course of the MCU, when Thanos was very greedy and very power hungry of wanting to bring balance to the universe with the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped 50% of the universe, Nebula had some personal begrudging against Thanos, and also because due to the fact Thanos chose Gamora for fatherly love to his his adopted daughter as opposed to his actual biological daughter. And that would explain all of the stuff that was going on with Nebula with that character. But it's supposed that Trakeena, well, yeah, Trakeena likes her father in Power Rangers, but when she got irritated with the constant time she was like told, no, you're not going to go out and destroy the Power Rangers. Why not? Because, I don't want you getting hurt. The time is not ready. You're not mature enough, or you're not battle ready enough, or some sexist sort of term with that. But again, I'm just saying with those kind of things like that, if Trakeena was done in Power Rangers in a cinematic universe today, like the MCU with Nebula and Guardians of the Galaxy, that's something I would see, as opposed to wanting to see an Azula like Trakeena or an Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader like Trakeena. If I were to do a Trakeena that was like Nebula from Guardians of the Galaxy and the last 2 Avengers movies, I can go with that. But also when it comes to like some other female villain from the MCU that had some family problems. Hela from Thor Ragnarok, in a way, if Trakeena was done like Hela in Power Rangers today. I mean, sure, you guys can have your Darth Vader and your Azula. I'd rather see, if I were to do Trakeena today, and what I've been trying to do for the last 11 years with that fan film thing, was trying to do her like Angelina Jolie's Maleficent, or the classic 1959 Maleficent, but updated in today's times. Not Gamora, Nebula from Guardians of the Galaxy, and Hela from Thor Ragnarok, or something like that of like. And because knowing of the fact that, you gotta have Scorpius tied to Trakeena in some way, and do the father and daughter stuff different. I'm not saying I don't. I mean, I had said the reasons why I never did care for Scorpius much in terms of, it's because of the way how he had belittled Trakeena, what made her so overlooked over the course of the season, but yet she did all of this tyrannical stuff following her father's passing. And when she recruited Villamax and Kegler and Deviant, but Deviant, well, he was a different animal with his agendas and stuff with both Scorpius, Trakeena, and the Power Rangers, much like how Dark Kanda wanted to overthrow the Power Rangers, Astronema, Ecliptor, Dark Spectre, pretty much everyone that Dark Kanda screwed the pooch with, like Deviant did with Scorpius, Trakeena, and the Power Rangers in his season. But yeah, and then seeing Trakeena being merged with Deviant, well, it still holds up as a advancing the character plot thread and trope. But the thing was, seeing her that power hungry, and one of the other theories I had with her while being considered overlooked, while her being combined with Deviant was cool and still frightening but cool, I have to admit that there was another theory I had before I get back to the Cocoon theory about, well, or I've already said my point there. But when she was merged with Deviant, there was a theory I had that, thinking back to Journey's End, that a part of me was like, while Trakeena was, donning Deviant's parts when she was merged with that metallic voice and all, and going insane and psycho and going, descending that far into madness, I would have to say that when Terra Venture was destroyed, the whole colony was destroyed. The Megazords were destroyed, except the Galaxy Megazord and Torozord. Kegler being killed off screen. Villamax getting backstabbed and killed to death, which like Disney Brain put it, with him being a hard pill to swallow. Because yeah, every time I do think about Villamax, I just wish Villamax could have stayed alive and could have been the only character in Lost Galaxy's pantheon of characters to be redeemed outside of Corone after her time being astronomer in space. But I digress. But all of that, you know, most of all of that, destroying Terra Venture, destroying the Megazords of Centaurus and Stratoforce, backstabbing and killing Villamax. I know that was all. I know that Trakeena did that, but most of it due to the fact that she had Deviat's personality and soul while within her body. Most of that was all Deviat's doing within Trakeena's soul, Trakeena's physical body. Because yeah, that seemed like some serious how do you put this, serious supernatural, intergalactic supernatural stuff, if you will, merging two souls into one body. And then, you know, you have one soul, you know, one mind overtaking someone else's mind and body, and then you have them go berserk and doing all this crazy stuff. Because even when I think about it, that's something that I had thought about, because knowing the fact, while Trakeena had been saying she wanted to destroy Terra Venture, but when Deviat merged with Trakeena into the cocoon, it infueled that. But most of it was all Deviat doing inherently, making her do that stuff. But then once the Scorpion Stinger crashed onto the moon, following Leo's jet jammer, and once Kegler, well, he was useless and he was killed off screen, and we don't know what. Well, we'll just say he was killed off screen because they never said otherwise. It just shows, not tells. But when she merged with when she went into the cocoon, and once Deviat's personality was fully gone for good, then Trakeena finally regained consciousness of her own personality again. But this time to amp up the last part of her evolution, with her mutating into that green mantis form, which. Okay, I have to be fair with the mantis form thing, that she has to be like that because, you know, it was pretty much something Scorpius wanted her to do, because what if something bad happened, that time would come that once she gets close to dying, she needs to use the cocoon in order to mutate into an insect like her, like her dad and the Stingwingers, in order to survive and have at least a few lives, or a life left. I know Trakeena is not Catwoman from Batman Returns or anything, because even I wish I saw some parallels of Trakeena inside, you know, some parallels of Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman from Batman Returns inside Trakeena, but except Trakeena's not Catwoman, so I digress. But if she was to have more lives than she could, like a cat, and, you know, with that, you know, thinking back to Batman Returns, and many times I rewatched that movie and saw Michelle Pfeiffer, Selena Kyle, Catwoman, you know, wanting revenge against Max Schreck. And I think some of that parallel with that version of Catwoman inside Trakeena, with Trakeena wanting revenge against the Red Ranger, except Trakeena didn't have a mental breakdown or anything, but she just wanted to say, those Power Rangers will pay for destroying my father. There were some things that, yeah, people have overlooked about the character, though. And, you know, she did have elements. I mean, some of her descent into madness and the tragedy of her tragedy of her character is what made her so overlooked. Because most of the time when people talk about Lost Galaxy in the fandom, everybody's always talking about Rangers like Maya and Kendricks and Leo, and other characters like Magda Defender, and Corone coming back to redeem her character arc from last season after being an evil villain herself to a team of Rangers, and then the Psycho Rangers coming back stuff, and then the team ups. But of all the angles of Lost Galaxy, everybody barely talks about Trakeena. Most of the time, everybody just brings up about how, you know, of course, you know, you have the male gaze that's all about, like, Trakeena was evil, but she was smoking hot, but evil. But there has to be more of that stuff besides about her being beautiful but evil. There's other factors to what made her what she was, besides those, you know, those compliments. But even during my time in the fandom now for the last 11 years, I did find her one of the most overlooked villains in Power Rangers, because even when I tried to do my own thing with Power Rangers on my personal thing, I've tried to do Trakeena a different way. While I have to respect what had come before, but what I tried to do for so long was trying to bring her back in a certain way outside of the television show universe and stuff, whatever I was doing, but I digress. But if she didn't get destroyed by Leo's battleizer, they would have done Trakeena's revenge differently, and you know, supposed to live up to what she was supposed to do instead of the stuff that happened on screen with that team up episode the next season. So, and also another theory that comes to the point with her initial considered death in LG when Leo used his battleizer. I think her green form in Lost Galaxies episode final did kept her alive, so she wasn't really destroyed. So there was a bit of some dialogue subtext contradiction. Once Leo got up and showed his iconic my visor broke, but with the thumb up thing, that I survived, I didn't die, unlike her. Basically, when I thought about Leo's line when he told the Rangers, when the Rangers thought Leo died in the explosion, when he said the line, "That will be the last time we'll ever see Trakeena," there was a bit of some theoretical contradiction to that line, because going into Lightspeed Rescue a year later with the crossover, I think there was something that there needs to be brought up about this, because I think when she used that green form, I think her green mutant form was a little strong enough to keep her still alive for at least another season, if she came back. Of course, Trakeena was not going to come back like Sledge, you know, Sledge and his crew from Dino Charge to other seasons like recently. But if Trakeena was doing that kind of stuff, then she would have stayed around for a couple of seasons. I would have liked to see Trakeena stay around for a few occasional seasons and still do evil stuff. But even though the Lost Galaxy story's over, so we have to move on with next generation of villains, because again, Lost Galaxy is not the Zordon era, so I have to understand and accept those things. But then again, yeah, I realize she is a very underrated villain, but yet she is one of Power Rangers' most well-known, or if not almost as well-known in the public consciousness. But if you're in the fandom of Power Rangers, if you've been watching the show for a long time, like me, you, and everybody else has, we know who Trakeena was. But for a lot of people who just, you know, never cared for Power Rangers, or only watched up until mid-turbo because of the cast change and stuff, and Mighty Morphin's era was long over and stuff, I mean, a lot of people have missed out villain greatness out of villains like Trakeena, and it's unfortunate, but not everyone was going to cater to her character, and people didn't think she was all that. For anyone who grew out of it because life went on for the following, who watched only MMPR and some of Zeo and Turbo and moved on because life, and grew out of it at a certain point, but that's fine. But now that those people who had stopped watching for a long time are now catching up on seasons like Lost Galaxy and trying to figure out who Trakeena was for the very first time from their own perspectives and opinions. But for someone who's watched the Power Rangers up to this point longer, and so has everyone else, I'm not saying just me, because that's being a bit too entitled, like I said, from the last episode. So I think I don't want to say much I can say for Disney Brain, but his video was very informational, but I didn't want to say everything he said word for word, but a few things. But bring up when I thought about the word overlooked. Yeah, because a lot of times when people bring up Power Ranger villains, it's like, you know, outside of all the villains, especially female villains, everybody was always talking about how Rita, Divatox, and Astronema was, and even Zed and the Psycho Rangers and Mesogog and, you know, Rancic and villains like that, and Venjix. But Trakeena is up there with that pantheon of villains that advanced the Power Rangers to where we are today. And I know I had acted a bit cynical about how But I still don't like some female villains after her, though. But I did open up on Camille from Jungle Fury. I'll probably do a Camille-centric video similarly, because like Trakeena, Camille in Jungle Fury, since I previously rewatched it recently, is also just as overlooked as Trakeena, because while the difference is, while Trakeena was pure evil throughout her whole entire run as a villain in LG, but in JF, Camille, while she was evil, but she had some humanity, and she had loyalty to Daishi, but she also got overlooked and overthrown by the Phantom Beast generals, Angelica and Grisaka and them. But wait until I discuss, if I can, on Camille when I do a Camille-centric discussion. So in final thoughts, yeah, I mean, as much as I've obsessed about Trakeena like a crazed, entitled fan, I never thought about this because she is overlooked. And a lot of people, whenever I do bring up her name, everybody's like, Trakeena, who? All I recall is, all hail Empress Rita, or Diva Tox. Viva la Diva. I was about to mess up Diva Tox's line. Viva la Diva. Yeah, but nobody barely talks about Trakeena most of the time because, well, again, everybody likes what they like, and I like what I like too. So that's all I can say, guys, about Trakeena. So there's not much I can say. So anyway, guys, Disney Brain, that was a great video on Trakeena. If you're watching and listening, I wish I would have reiterated what you said, but I had to bring my spin on the table about how she's overlooked. But anyway, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next episode of the Terra Adventure Podcast. Anthony Marsh on Power Rangers Lost Galaxy fan film. Subscribe, drop a like, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.